Hey guys, it's Dylan, and I'm excited to announce the debut of a brand new show. Most of you guys know I've did podcasting before with Bluegrass Banter and multiple other shows, been featured on multiple shows, but this podcast is going to be a little different. It's going to be called Success Stories Unplugged. We're going to be meeting with people and talking about the topics of our everyday life, topics that'll help you in your everyday life, things like godly parenting. We're going to be talking about things like how do you mix faith and business. We're going to be talking about all the things. We're also going to pull back the curtain with some highly successful people in the sports field, in the business field, pastors, and pull back the curtain and let you see how they do in everyday life with all the eyes on them. And we have some exciting guests this season already lined up. So we want you to subscribe to all our podcast shows on all the channels. You can find it anywhere. Also our YouTube channel, and be following these social media accounts to keep updated on all the upcoming shows. Thank you, and we look forward to you listening. All right, Matt, I want to say thank you so much for coming on and doing this with us. This is going to be kind of the first episode within our BBN series of success, behind the success stories kind of thing we're doing right now on the show. But first, I want to say thank you to you and kind of get that out of the way before we get in this. I now am a CEO of a real estate company. We run about 150 employees. The sports media thing's just going great for me. But there was a time in my life when I was super down and out and didn't seem like a ton was going for me. Mm-hmm. And not trying to get emotional, but I texted you and told you what was going on, told you like media stuff's not taking traction. I own a business and COVID's just started. And as busy as you are, every time I messaged you, you messaged back. Every time I would call the show, you'd give him positive words. You would give me advice. And I know you don't even do a lot of shows outside of your own, just because I'm sure you get thousands of requests. But I just want to say, before we get into what we're going to do on the show, I just want to say thank you for that.
That's very kind of you.
I know you have a lot of people you can encourage, but when you decided to encourage me, that meant a lot.
Well, I appreciate it. First of all, I was very blessed when I started to have people who I looked up to, who were encouraging to me. The older I get, like any individuals, when I was young, man, I was like, I gotta kill it. And when I started, I wasn't, I was hard to work with. I was actually hard on people. I was like, thought the way for me to succeed was to knock other people down. And I wasn't a bad person, but I also wasn't acting out the way I should sometimes in my pursuit of individual success. As I've gotten older, we're not on this earth for very long, right? And the goal is to make others' lives better. Like, what's the point? Like, what's the point of being here except to help other people? And when you wrote me, we don't have to go into what it was, but you were expressing a lot of the things that a lot of people deal with, and I just wanted to tell you weren't alone. And I'm glad to see your success. It's awesome, and I'm sure it will continue.
I appreciate that, and I think that a lot of people connect with you. You're from the mountains. Mm-hmm. You're being successful in an avenue that a lot of kids dream of, and that's a blessing. But it hasn't come without hard work.
Yeah.
And the thing that we're doing on this show is going behind the curtain, going behind the scenes of the success stories, because like Matt Jones is on the radio 2 hours a day. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? But there's a lot of work that goes into it.
Yeah, I mean, there are people who think you only work 2 hours a day. I was talking about this. We had a staff meeting for the website last week, and I was kind of talking. People were talking about their work schedules, and I said, I never want to be the dude who's like, back in my day, we walked uphill both ways. Like, I hate that stuff because, everybody has their challenges. I mean, honestly, younger people now have challenges I never had to deal with, which is living online and all the insecurities that can come from living online and seeing other people's life and like going, why is it mine like that? So I didn't have to deal with any of that. With that said, when I started this, I was a lawyer, right? So I would work 8 to 6 as a lawyer and then do the website from 6 until midnight. I mean, I just worked nonstop. That's, I don't think, a healthy way to do it, but that's kind of what I did but it was because I didn't consider the UK part of it work.
You know.
I thought it was fun. A lot of our success was good timing. Like, started a website at the perfect time to start a website. Started a podcast at the perfect time to start a podcast. You know, kind of hit the UK fan market before it had been saturated. And all of that stuff really helped. You could be the best person in the world. If you don't get some luck, it's not going to work. You know, so we were very fortunate. But I did work very hard. One of the things I've tried to do, you know, I worked myself into the hospital, right?
Yeah.
Like 3 years ago, I ended up in the hospital for almost complete stress-related reasons. And when I came out, I said, you know, I can't do that again. Like, I can't live like that. And so I've changed a lot of my approach to stuff. But hard work, you know, I always tell people, don't focus on the destination. Because you might not reach the destination. Even if it's not your fault, it might not happen. But the journey is what life's about, and I've really enjoyed the journey.
And going to your journey, I was kind of in that same place when I messaged you. I was starting a business, and I took on that. Like you said, you ended up in the hospital. I didn't end up in the hospital, but I ended up in a place where I was running multiple businesses because businesses had branched off, and I was doing the UK stuff because I loved it, right? And I'm assistant pastor at a church, and I went from like being down and out because nothing was working to just recently to a point where like it's all working so well, like you were talking about, that you're just overloaded. And I walked in and my wife was like, something's got to change.
Yeah.
So it's finding that balance. But anything that you want to be successful in, I've realized you're going to have to put forth the effort.
You are.
And you're going to have to, like you said, be
And
willing to adapt where the destination is.
I told you this when you wrote me, and I think it's a message that people really need to take to heart. It's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
Like, that's an important sentence. You know, Freddie Maggard, who is one of the best people that I've ever known, is dealing with a lot of struggles. And I think I said that to him once, and I think he repeats it all the time because of the struggles. It's okay to not be okay. Every single person is dealing with something. Some people are just better at hiding it.
Yeah.
Right? But everybody's dealing with something. And the older you get, that something only increases.
Yeah.
Like, when you're 25, 23, like, life's fun. You still could be dealing with stuff, but like, you got a whole life. But when you get to be in your 40s, like, you got a lot. And people have kids or, you know, spouses. I'm at the age that I have a lot of friends who maybe their marriages aren't going great because of, you know, their kids are out of the house or something for the first time. And now, so like, there's always something, and it always has helped me to know I'm not alone.
Yeah.
And since I went in the hospital, and even before that, since I came public with my seizure disorder, the amount of people that write me that talk about their struggles, it's almost like people feel like it's therapeutic to talk to me about it.
Yeah.
And I always try to listen, because sometimes that's just somebody just needs somebody to listen to them, you know?
Have you ever felt like this, and we'll get into the deep success, because I felt like this at one point when I was running a business, or I had 4 or 5 businesses we'd branched off into, and I'm helping pastor the church. And I know that you are a person that has, you know, got a predominant role in the UK fan base, got a lot of social media followers, and people look to that as a goal. But did you ever get to a place when you were talking about the stress, and I know you've talked about on the show, of not having to live through online? I described it as I was in a very crowded room, but felt very alone.
Oh, listen, I felt it is very hard. It has been hard for me. It's much better now, but I'm not going to act like it's not hard sometimes. It is hard when you are singularly feeling something that no one else is. So, you know, and again, I don't want anybody to feel a pity party for me. I have a great life. But, you know, nobody really deals with what I deal with. And that may be true for everybody. But like, you can feel alone. And you can feel like, okay, I'll give you the perfect example. In 2020, it was Christmas. And my parents were, you know, they're older. And my dad was very, very sick. And I didn't feel like I could go home for Christmas because I didn't want him to get COVID, right? I sat there on Christmas Day in my house in Louisville by myself on Christmas Day. And I don't know that I've ever felt more alone in my life. Like, all this success, right? All this awesome experiences. And it's Christmas Day, though, and you're still sitting by yourself. everybody has that moment, right? You can be in a family. You can have a wife and 4 kids and feel alone, right? Like you can feel alone. And I think it's okay to understand that, but also, so yeah, it's tough. And then I'm in a weird position where a lot of people sort of think they know me. And
because they get into your life for 2 hours.
Yeah, and radio is the most intimate of all mediums. Like radio, much more than television. If you listen to somebody on the radio for 2 hours, you get a good sense of who they are. Now, you don't know all they are, but you know some of it. And because of that, people feel like they know you, and they will say things to you. Like, people say things to me they would never say to other people. No. Like, they just, like, good and bad.
Yeah.
Okay. So people will be good to me in ways that they're not, but they'll also be bad to me in ways that they would never do to, because they feel like they know me. And so they can get mad at me because I always say, well, why don't you just not listen? Because they want to listen, but they want to tell me I suck.
Yeah.
And so that's tough. So it is
I'm
a
in
hard
messages where all the time where people are like, gosh dang it, Matt Jones. And I'm like,
why
listening.
Are you listening?
You're listening
why
right
are you
now.
Listening? But I get it, because Bill Simmons is somebody I've listened to for 20 years. He drives me insane now. Yeah. Like, I can't listen to him talk about the Celtics. The way I hear Bill Simmons talks about the Celtics is probably how Republicans listen to me talk about politics. Like, it drives them crazy. Yet, I want to hear what he has to say about the Celtics. And I turn it on, and I find myself frustrated. I'm like, why do I listen to this? But it's because I feel like I know him. I've talked to him one time. He's been on my show one time. But I feel like he's my friend, and that's what radio does.
I mean, I was there at one point, and you were talking about that moment where you're like, okay, like, oh my gosh, that's that moment. As weird as it is, it happened to me in Planet Fitness parking lot. Right before I went to the gym, I was just sitting there, and I just had a breakdown, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, I've got all this church family, I've got these awesome businesses, but that didn't fix the problem. You know what I'm saying?
And that's ultimately, I mean, I know this is somewhat of a faith-based thing, but like, I mean, that's ultimately what the role for me of God is. You know, it's very hard as a Christian and an outgoing Christian. It's odd to me how much of my hate is from other Christians.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's hard to deal with.
The amount of people, I would say 90% of the people who say the worst things to me have Christian in their bio.
Yeah.
Or they'll have a Bible verse in their bio, or something about the Lord is king. And that's hard for me because I will get told once a day, how can you as a Christian be a Democrat? Or how can you as a Christian think this? Like who do you know? How many people do you know that would have strangers come up to you and say you're not a Christian? I get that every day. And what I had to find was the confidence that my relationship with God does not require an intermediary.
No.
That's hard to say to you as a pastor because, like, you are many people's intermediary. But for me, I had to think, Bob does not get to decide. I'm just making Bob as a mistake. Bob does not get to decide whether I'm good with God.
No.
Honestly, being closer to my faith is in part how I've answered that at times loneliness. I don't want it to seem like I'm always lonely. I'm not. I have a great family, great friends. But feeling like I can sit down and have a relationship with the Lord has been very helpful to me. It is not helpful that when I talk about it, people go, well, you're not a real Christian. But then somebody said this to me about a year ago, and it's the truest thing I've said on the radio. Nobody who's happy in their life is going to be bad to people online.
No.
Anyone who's bad to you online, something's like they're having issues. And so I try, not always good at it, to have sympathy for them. Because when you've been happy, have you ever wanted to go yell at a stranger online?
No, I don't worry about that.
I don't worry about it because you're happy, right? When I've been my happiest, I'm not online arguing with people. If I go back and look, when I've argued with people the most has been when I'm the most unhappy. Yeah. So like I try to keep that in mind and not take it as personal.
For me right now, I'm in this season of life where it's just, and I know there's seasons for everybody, where it just seems like everything's going great. And, you know, those come and go. And I like right now I'll have some Tennessee fan get in my comments and tell me the worst thing ever about me, and I'm like,
yeah, I don't care about them.
Yeah.
I don't care about Tennessee. I don't care about fans of other teams.
Yeah.
Because that's a sports thing. It does eat at me sometimes when it's
listener.
Kentucky fans or listeners, because it feels like I want to say, I don't know if you saw this. I wrote to somebody in Eastern Kentucky a couple weeks ago. They wrote something about me being the worst. And I said to him, you're from whatever town he was from. I was like, if I met you,
you wouldn't do it.
You and I would get along. You would like me. I would like you, and I'd be good to you. And I said, why are you being shitty to me? Excuse my language.
No, you're good.
And he wrote me and said, I don't know. You're right. And I think, so it does get me sometimes when it's those people. I don't, other fan bases, whatever, strangers, whatever. But for some reason, people who listen to my show and say that, it bothers me. It doesn't bother me as much as it used to, but I still have to get over that. Like, you can't go for the approval of strangers. But we're in a business where the approval of strangers is how you have success.
And it's how you make money.
It's how you make money. So weirdly, I need to both not care what people think, but I have to care what people think in order to get people to listen. And that's tough. That's a tough back and forth.
It is a tough back and forth. And I've been in a place where, like, you have great people around you, and they're telling you this, and then you'll get on social media.
It doesn't matter, though. You can see 100 positive comments, and you remember the negative.
And then you remember the negative.
And some people, I give credit to the people who cannot do that. But a lot of those people are like psychopaths. Like, if you like people hating you, I kind of wonder what's wrong with you.
Yeah.
Like, how do you like people hating you? Like, I can't do that. What you do have to, though, and Shannon, the dude, is probably the best at telling me this over the years. Like, you can't worry about the one.
No.
Chip Cosby, I don't know if you know Chip.
Yeah, I know
Chip used to cover UK football, and he and I worked together at a TV station once. And this was 10 years ago when we hadn't done nearly as many successful things. Chip sat me down one day, and he goes, dude, when are you just going to enjoy your success? When are you going to stop always being ready to fight?
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what, he's right. Like, why don't you take a minute and not worry about the one to fight with and worry about the 100 that are saying something good to you?
And going back to that, you were talking about being in faith, and this is a faith-based thing where I'm bringing sports people in, business people. I'm blessed with different avenues of life where I get to serve people. And I know, though, from me listening to the show, and that you do have that relationship with God, and I personally feel like everybody's got a God-shaped void in their life, and they got to fill it. That's part of being a Christian for me, and it looks different to everyone. How hard does it get to maintain that relationship? I know you have that inner relationship with God, but how difficult does it become when everybody is telling you you're not a Christian because you don't believe this?
It's not hard to me because I grew up in the church. My mom is one of the best people that I ever know. My mom graduated seminary at age 70. My mom raised me in faith. I was going to revivals when I was a little kid. I've been to mountain singing churches deep in the hills of Hancock County, Tennessee. And nobody's going to shake my faith in God. But what it does do is it makes me sad for Christianity, because the goal of Christianity should be to spread the word of Jesus Christ. It should be to bring people to him. And what has happened, I think, in the last 8 to 10 years is that people have wrapped up Christianity with politics, and they have made the politics shape their Christianity. And they've made the desire to win in a political world influence what the goal of all of this should be. The goal of Christians should be to, let's say you think there's a sinner. You should want to bring them into the fold. You shouldn't want to scorn them. You shouldn't want to say, let God be the one that judges, right?
The Bible says
you think I'm going to get to the pearly gates and they're going to ask me who I voted for? No. I mean, in the grand scheme of humanity, do you really think that's how things are going to be decided? Who was the president of Spain in 1830? I don't know, but there were a lot of Catholics there that are in heaven. And you know what? I don't think anybody asked them whether or not they liked the king in 1830, right? Like, it doesn't matter. And for me, you're not going to shake my faith in God, but there are people that you will.
Yeah.
There are people who are lonely, who are sad, who are looking for strength. And you as a Christian, and me as a Christian, our job is to bring them love. Our job is not to bring them hate. At least that's my belief. And I hate seeing that. Many years ago, I heard Jesse Jackson speak at Transylvania when I was in college. And he said, now to be fair, Jesse Jackson was involved in politics, so it's a little hypocritical, but Jesse Jackson said, politics and religion should never be intertwined because it makes both of them worse.
Yeah.
And that's the truth. It makes both of them worse. And I worry about that in America. I really do. I worry that we are equating belief in a human being with belief in God.
Yeah.
And that's dangerous. I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's the best person on the planet. Humans are sinners. Humans are fragile. God is a different situation.
And for me, you know, if you want to take your personal beliefs from politics and take it in the voting booth or your basic, take it in there.
Yes.
If you think it correlates, do your thing. But I do think that the Bible is very clear. Love God, love others. That's the whole commandment.
That's the whole point.
That's the whole thing we're here for.
What is the point of being on earth except to love others? What is the point except to help other people? We're all sinners. We all make mistakes. You know, is one mistake worse than the other? I mean, I guess on some level, but at the same time, that's not for us to judge.
No,
you know,
sin.
And I have many faults, but I hope my strength is I do have an unbelievable goal and hopefully ability to forgive. Forgiveness to me is practiced so little in society, especially in America, but maybe around the world. But I know in America, you have to forgive. I hold no grudges towards anyone. And that to me is what Christians are called to do. And it feels like the more years go, it's like grudges are even more a part of religion. And that I just think I think it's a fundamental distortion of what Christianity and God tells us to do.
And going back to success, I think that when you were talking about the people coming at you, and me and you went down that road there a second ago, one thing that I realized for somebody who is a successful person or wanting to strive for a goal and listen to this and thinking about the people that may be talking to you, may be talking to me, saying that you can't do this, you can't do that. I think that if you're striving for success, one thing that you have to realize as success comes, especially on a platform like you, is that from whom much is given, much is required.
Of course.
And much is, if you're going to have this success, if somebody's watching this or listening to this and saying, I want to have that kind of success in business, in faith, in whatever it is, it's going to come with criticism. It's going to come with this.
And it's hard.
And when you get that level, you got to know that that's going to come.
But that doesn't make it any easier when you deal with it. In the moment, that doesn't make it any easier. But, you know, I would also say I think when you do things for other people, it shouldn't be something you promote. Mm-hmm. So I'm a big self-promoter. Like, people often accuse me of being arrogant, and they're probably right to some extent. I'll self-promote the show. I'll promote the bar. I'll promote OVW. I'll promote our ratings. I'll talk about how great we are. But one thing you'll never hear me talk about, unless the other person talks about it first, is what I do for other people behind the scenes, because it's not anyone's business. And you don't do things so that you get credit for them. And it's hard when someone will say something really bad about you, and you know the things you've done, but I'm not going to tell them that. You know, I wouldn't have brought up the conversation that we had, but you did, and I very much thank you for that. But you're not the only person that I've tried to do that for. You know, the text machine on the show, it's amazing to me how many people write me that are lonely, that are dealing with a health issue, or are just sad. And I'm not going to say I write them all because I don't have time, but I write a lot of them. And especially when I see something that I think I can be of help. But you have to do that and then not go, well, I posted this to this guy. And that's hard because people don't see that balance in you at any given time. And
that goes back to what you're saying. You got to be doing that for a different reason.
I'm doing it because it's what I'm supposed to do. When you say much is given, much is expected, I agree. But for me, the much is expected is to help is to help other people, and to do it in a way that I think glorifies God and represents the community I'm from. You know, you're from the mountains, right? Like, mountains are a special place, right? Yeah. And, you know, when there was that flood in Breathitt County, and I went and watched all these people helping and giving people supplies and clothes and helping rebuild houses and all this. They didn't ask them who they voted for.
No.
They didn't. That was just people just jumping in and doing what was right. To me, that's
what makes our state great too.
Yeah, and that's the power of God, right?
Yeah.
That's the power of God, and that's what it should be about.
And I was down there those days and saw those things, and it did make me realize, like, there are still good people in this world. Online's not real.
No, first of all, 98% of the people in this world are good. I would say 99% of the people in the world are good. Now, we all have bad in us too, right? Like we all have weaknesses. And I think one of the problems with the online world is it magnifies our weaknesses. I said about COVID, whatever was your worst quality, COVID brought it out more.
Yeah, magnified it for sure.
Whatever was your worst quality, being alone or being in a secluded brought out it worse. I think the same is true about online. I think most people online are the worst version of themselves.
I think that's true. And I went through a case, and you reposted it and told me one day a guy wrote me, I had done a miscue in an article and he wrote at me and said, because I was talking about, and we'll get into this in a minute, but I was talking about I didn't approve of the job John Calipari was doing anymore. And we'd just lost in the SEC tournament, and I was writing an article, and somebody screenshotted it and said, this dude can't even effing read or write, and you guys are reading his work. And I commented back and said, what you don't know is I deal with dyslexia, and I do math at an extremely high level. I flourished. I had my college classes done before even I got out of high school in math. I said, but I was taking intermediate reading courses till I was a senior in high school and my parents paid for special counselors. I was blessed with parents with had good finances, and it made it to where they brought me up. But I was reading at such a low level because the doctors had told me my brain just doesn't function in that category like normal people
crazy.
do.
Even my co-writer on my book,
Yeah.
Chris Tomlin, had a stroke, and part of the ramifications of the stroke, and this has gotten much better, is he was same intelligence level. He could write, but then he couldn't read what he wrote.
Wow.
His brain could not, he could literally type whatever.
Yeah.
But then he couldn't read it back. And now that's gotten better. But think about your brain, how that is. I mean, when I have seizures or when I have auras, I could be sitting here, communicate with you.
Yeah.
I could communicate with you for 10 straight minutes and seem normal, and I won't remember any of it. I won't even know that it happened. And in 10 minutes, when I kind of come to, it'll be like nothing occurred.
Right.
That's crazy, but that's how your brain is. And so again, that goes back to everybody's dealing with something. And I think what you've done for a person who has dyslexia to then decide, because you could have easily just decided, I'm not going to do a career where I could be embarrassed. To then decide to do a career where you will confront that on a daily basis is that's pretty powerful. It's very strong, and so I'm proud of you for that. That's not easy.
I think and one day I saw, it was a guy, my least favorite Twitter accounts are the ones without a profile picture that just want to talk crap to you.
Unfortunately, that's
more of them.
Yeah.
But besides that, I saw the guy at a game one day because he didn't know I knew who he was, and you know how it is. You have more followers than me, but as soon as he posted that thing about
nice.
me, somebody was like, "This is who that is."
Yeah, they're always nice.
And I saw him at a game one day, and I said, in the moment that hurt me, but I just want to let you know, even if you don't know this or not, I've forgiven you for that. And it did. I said, I want to thank you because it gave me a moment to come out about my struggles. And you don't know how many people came to me and said, that helped me. Mm-hmm. Even one day, Mark Story stopped me at an NCAA game. Me and Mark hardly ever talk. He'll say hello in passing. And he said, I know people that told me that helped them when I reposted that. And I just said,
well, that's great. Well,
thank you for giving me that opportunity.
Right? I had a seizure on a Netflix documentary.
Yeah, I was going to go into that.
Yeah, that's the director and I had a lot of conversations about whether he was going to use it. And he wanted to use it. He said he thought it was important to tell the story. And I said, okay. And that's But I've had people from all over the world, literally all over the world, write me who have seizures, who have children who have seizures, and I'm glad it happened. I am. I'm glad it happened. I'm glad it was on TV. It's hard for people to watch, but I'm glad because you know what? There are millions of people that deal with it.
Yeah.
And now, for some people, like I'm the person they can associate with it, and so that's good.
You are extremely successful. You founded KSR. You do the show. You did the website. You own wedding venues now. You've done multiple career avenues.
Big on the wedding venues.
Yeah.
Like,
you own the wedding
there's
venue.
one thing I know, it's wedding
Yeah,
venues. So I have nothing to do with it, which is why it works.
Yeah.
If I had to do any of it, it would be a failure.
Yeah, and then you've got the OVW, and for those who don't know, they did documentary guys on Netflix called Wrestlers. It is fantastic, but I'm a diehard WWE fan, so that's
No, it is really well done. Take me out of it. The guy who did it, like it's an awesome piece
amazing.
of. New York Times said it was one of the 10 best shows of 2023, and it is. The guy who did it, it's the same guy, if you're watching Netflix, who did the Dallas Cowboys cheerleader show that just came out. No offense to it, this is better than that.
is.
Like it's really well done.
And in that third episode, you had that seizure, and you talked about talking to that producer. What made you want to let them keep that in?
Well, I knew it was important for the story because in real life, people looked at me differently after the seizure. You know, they sort of most of people in the wrestling didn't know me before. So like, you know, if you watch the documentary, my relationship with them was difficult at first. And I think they looked at me differently. And so I knew for the story he was going to be telling, it was important for him to show why these people were looking at me differently, right? Because I looked like a human being to them. So I got it. Also, though, I mean, I'm a real person. Look, I'm on the radio 2 hours a day. I mean, I talk about every single thing I do in my life except dating. I don't talk about that because I don't think
Nobody's business.
Well, I don't think it's fair to the people that I've gone out with. I don't think it's fair to introduce people into this world who haven't asked to be
Introduced to it.
to be part of it. But besides that, I talk about everything, and so you know, I was used to it. But yeah. Did I wake up at 3:15 in the morning when they dropped it on Netflix and watch it scared to death to watch myself have a seizure? Yeah, I'd never seen it. It made me much more emotional than I thought it would.
You saw it when the world saw it, right?
Yeah, because I never see myself have a seizure, so I had never seen it, and seeing it was hard. It was hard for my mom. My mom had never seen it. I had a lot of friends who had never seen it, and that part was hard. I did not expect it to affect me like it did. But when you watch yourself having a seizure and being out of control like that, that was a lot.
Talked about your mom there, and you talked about her earlier. She keeps coming up. What has your mom meant to your success? I know she helped you with those roots of faith, but just every time I listen to a show you're on, you're talking about her, and she seems
everything.
awesome.
Like my parents divorced when I was young. There were a couple years that it was just my mom and I, and then she married my stepdad, who's a wonderful man. And but yeah, I mean, everything I am is because of how she helped me be. I mean, there were a lot of factors working against me having success. You know, the area I'm from is difficult for people. I'm proud of it, but there's, you know, a lot of people don't get the luck and opportunity I have. You know, my father was an alcoholic. There's a lot of alcoholism in my family. It would have been easy for me to drop into that, and my mom didn't let any of that happen. Right? She made education a priority. I'm an only child. She never made me feel less than anyone. And, you know, you see how many kids at the start of their lives are dealt a hand that makes it impossible. I was fortunate, right? I was very fortunate. And, you know, my mom was a big part of that happening. So I also just have I'm proud of her. I mean, think about this, man. She was 66 years old. She was one of two female prosecutors, the first prosecutors elected in the state of Kentucky that were women. So think about that.
It's a hard barrier to get over.
And from Eastern Kentucky. how hard it was for a woman to win in Eastern Kentucky. It was hard. She was a Republican back when Eastern
Nobody
Kentucky
was.
only elected Democrats, right?
Yeah.
So she overcame all this stuff. Then at 66, she retires and goes to seminary, goes to school, and doesn't just go to seminary, goes to one of the best seminaries in the country. And she wouldn't talk about it, is one of the best students, if not the best student in the seminary. Graduates at age 70. Come on.
Yeah.
Like, how can you not be going, wow? And she was the daughter of a man who worked at a gas station from Hancock County, Tennessee. You know, like the fact that she was able to do that, I mean, how can you not be impressed?
And it, you know, for me, I feel like most success stories of people of faith, there's a good like praying mom behind that, and it seems like that's definitely
and that's a good thing about the culture we grew up in. There's a church. I was in a great church family.
Yeah.
You know, my extended family had a lot of preachers and what do they call them? Circuit riding preachers who would go from church to church, and you know, my grandfather was a preacher.
My grandpa's one now.
Great grandfather was one of those. And like, there's not many of those left.
Yeah.
You say your grandfather's one now?
When he gets excited, Dalton, he'll do it, won't he? When he gets
Really?
you'll have to come to Richmond and hear him one time.
In Richmond,
Kentucky.
there's a preacher in Richmond.
When he gets excited, about 15 minutes in, he
Wow.
starts. So
I didn't know. I thought that was still only in the deep mountains. All right.
There's quite a few in Rockcastle.
Well, good. Well, I'm glad, because that's in a culture where everything is growing more and more the same. There's a McDonald's and a Subway on every corner. The fact that there are still pockets of unique culture, I think, and Appalachia is certainly one of them.
So for us, and then we'll get back on topic, my grandfather preaches like that when he gets real good and gets going. And you would think that that's a dying thing. But at our church, the young people eat him up. Like, our church is now running like 5.
But they're not doing it because it's like that
No,
was.
they love him, don't they?
Okay,
Dalton?
good.
Yeah,
I'm glad to hear that still go. You know, I mean, still to this day, my favorite music in the world is mountain gospel, like singing old hymns
yeah.
with a mountain voice. You know, that's part of why I like Tyler and Sturgill. They'll bring some of that out sometimes. You know, it's hard. Some of those old I kind of don't like modern Christian. I wish everybody, but when there's a guitar in church and stuff, it's just not really for me. But you get that old a cappella mountain gospel, which is unfortunately kind of a dying art. That's my kind of music.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm glad to hear your grandfather does.
Yeah, it's funny. You'll walk in, see all these young people in skinny jeans and T-shirts, and then they're hugging him and taking pictures with him after church. And the church has grown like 200 or 300 people in a
I
few
still
last few
can't get
years.
used to people wearing T-shirts to church.
Church.
But I mean, like, if it's who am I to judge? It's still hard for me to picture. But
You were talking about where your mom raised you, and me and you got into some of the culture talk about the mountains. I've listened to it from afar, from KSR, from 10 to 12 years now, and I love it so much. But one of the things that I take away every time is when something happens in this state, when something happens in the mountains, the way that you guys step up to the plate. What does the area that you're from mean to you?
oh, it's huge, right? Like, I mean,
People like from those areas don't make it in the places you've made it often.
no, believe me, I recognize that. Like, I recognize, you know, I go back to my high school class. There were a lot of smart people in my high school class. There were a lot of people who could have had a lot of success, and there are people who've had success, but a lot of people didn't get the chance, right? Like, a lot of people didn't get the opportunities I did, and I think about that. And, you know, I think people who are here's one thing that I wish people would realize. A lot of the groups of people that are made by society not to like each other have a lot in common. So people from rural Appalachia, we have a lot more in common with black people from the inner city than we do with like rich people from Cape Cod.
Yeah.
We have a lot more in common. Like, we're based around the church.
Yeah.
Right? We have a lot of people in our neighborhoods who do things that they shouldn't do. We have a hard time economically. Like, if people would realize that if you grow up in inner city Detroit and you grow up in Harlan County, you actually have a lot in common.
More than you think.
You know, you actually have a lot of things in common. And I think that what happens is when you grow up somewhere like that, you just have a natural tie to self, or to your area. You know, if you grow up in, pick a Fresno, California. Like, do you
Yeah.
really care about Fresno, California? I mean, maybe some people do, but like people from the hills and people from the hood feel a connection to it.
Yeah.
And I think that's beautiful, actually, that people who have the hardest economic situation feel the most connection to place. I think that's great. And I feel that way and that's why I will always take up for and want to give back to the mountains. I mean, I hate when people in my political party mock Trump supporters. I hate it because whatever you think of him, most of those supporters are good people, just think differently than you do, and I think it's important to remember that.
We got into it just organically, but one of the questions I was going to ask you were talking about, so many of your listeners are the opposite political party than you. And even though sometimes they'll try to argue with you, they'll call in, they'll say stuff, and you do a great job of cutting them off. I think it speaks to your success, the fact that there's still, what would you say, 75% of your listeners
I'd say 75% of my listeners are conservatives. It's a rare thing in this country what KSR is, which is unfortunately we're losing the communal gathering place.
Yeah.
Because of the hyper specificity of life now, people tend to spend time with people they're like only, right? They tend to, on the internet, whatever you're into, you can find people that are, and then you just stay with it, right? So there are very few public spaces of community. People watch the news network they agree with, right? Like they're when I was a kid, everybody watched The Cosby Show or everybody watched Seinfeld. There aren't TV shows like that anymore that every single person watches. The Super Bowl is one of the last events that the whole country stops to watch. The Olympics, kind of what made it great this year, is everybody stopped to watch it. I do think for the people in Kentucky, it has been very important to me to make KSR, as much as it can be, that communal space where old people listen, young people listen, men listen, women, Republicans, Democrats, Christians, atheists, straight, gay, black, white. That's important because we don't have that. There's just not a lot of that. And so I am proud that I do think we do that about as well as you can do it, or at least I hope we do.
The best. And for me, I think that's what I love about it. It is in a way from everything else. When I'm sitting at work on Monday and I put it on, and if I'm running out of my office or not, I keep it playing in there 10 to noon every day because I'm like, this is the getaway from everything else. Because even if you bring up, I've learned more from you about law stuff with like political parties and different, just like yesterday you were talking about the way delegates work or the day before, whatever that was. And I was like, man, I'm learning this. And even if me and him maybe don't align on everything, I can sit and learn from this guy because it doesn't matter.
And that's why I talk about it. People will
Yeah.
say to me, why do you talk? A lot of people say, and this is a reasonable position, like, I want to get away from politics, so I wish you didn't talk about it. I understand that opinion. I do. I get it. But I try in my own way to make people realize that the differences that the media and society want to pound in your head about politics are no different than loving Coke or Pepsi.
Yeah.
You and I could disagree about whether Dr. Pepper Zero is good, and there's no scenario where we're going to hate each other for it.
Yeah.
Politics should be like that. We should be able to disagree about it without hating each other. And the reason I talk about it is I want people listening to know, you know what? You like me, Drew, Ryan, and Shannon. You all feel a connection to us. Hey, everybody, we are all Democrats, and yet you still like it. So guess what? You might like some of the other people too.
Yeah.
And by the way, when I go on ESPN, where a lot of times most of the listeners are Democrats, I'm praising Eastern Kentucky and Republicans to say to them, they're not these hillbillies you think they are. They're good people. They're interesting. They're fun. So that's why I do it. I don't do it because I want to convince anybody. I'm not going to convince anybody. Like people, one of the things I've learned, you can't convince people anything. They got to convince themselves.
Yeah.
Right? But what I want to do is tell them, don't take this stuff so seriously. Remember, what's most important is our common connection. And on KSR, it's really being Kentuckians and Kentucky sports fans, but really more than that, Kentuckians. We have a lot of people who don't even like sports.
Yeah.
You know,
That's the thing that has amazed me. If you pulled in everybody from everywhere, every denomination, every party, all these things, and built this community around it. But one of the last things as I'm starting to close up with this interview is I've been talking to all these people. I've talked to business people. We're getting ready to talk to Miss Kelly Craft next week.
Well, take Kelly Craft for a minute. Politically, she and I could not be more different. I mean, we disagree on almost everything. She's one of my very good friends. Like, we talk regularly. When she asks, I give her advice. She's given me advice. I think she's a wonderful person. So on the surface, people will go, how could these two people be friends? But to me, it's easy because Joe and Kelly Craft have good hearts.
Yeah.
Joe and Kelly Craft care about Eastern Kentucky, just like I do. They care about people in the mountains. They care about the state. And yeah, we may have different ideas as to what the best path is, but I'll always be her friend.
Yeah.
And that, again, to me is how it should be.
And that's what I get into all this behind the scenes of your success. You know, when I messaged you the first time, you didn't say, "Hey, what's your political party?" Before like, how crazy does that even sound? Like, why do people care?
I mean, like, Perrin Johnson played basketball at Louisville. And Perrin Johnson is one of my best friends. It drives Louisville fans crazy that he's my friend. But Perrin Johnson would, if I called him right now, drop everything he was doing and come do whatever I needed because he's a wonderful human being. Has nothing to do with playing with Louisville, right? Why would it be any different if they were a Republican? Like, that's stupid. My mom was a Republican. Like, you know, my entire family except me is. So, like, you know, come on.
It's crazy. But so for me, what keeps you going in your everyday life? Because this is a high stress thing, and people probably think, like you said, 2 hours on the radio that's Matt Jones's life. But you've talked about to where it got to the point where you were put in the hospital, the opening up about the seizures, different things. But like, what keeps you going day to day with such a high level of productivity?
Yeah, I mean, it does at its core still enjoyable. Like, the day it stops being enjoyable, I won't do it anymore. I mean, I've been very fortunate that, you know, I could probably not do this anymore and be fine. So the day I stop enjoying it, I won't do it anymore. And that day I thought was close. I mean, I was very, very close in January, February, March to saying, you know what, it's been a great run, but I'm done. Or at least I'm taking some time from doing it. I was very close. And then, you know, Cal left, Pope got here. Some of the situations in my work situation changed for the better because of that. I was able to take some time to myself and go travel, which I really love and which is hard to do in this job just because on a radio show you got to be on it every day. You know, so but yeah, the day I stop enjoying it, I will stop doing it. So what keeps me going? It's a purpose. Like you want a purpose-driven life. Okay, well, my purpose-driven life at its core is about faith and about my family. But in terms of a working life, this is what I'm good at. Like,
the best.
You know, there's other stuff if I had to start like being an auto mechanic, I'd be the worst one in the country, right? Like, if I had to
I love listening to your shows,
I'd
and you're
be
like,
the worst
what do I need to do
in the world. And I do believe this. I was joking a couple days ago on the show about people tell their kids they can do anything and they can't. People were laughing at that, but I do think every human being out there has the potential to do something great.
Yeah.
Now, it may not be what they want to do initially, but they have the potential to do something great. And I think the purpose of life is to find that what matters to you. And then once you've done that, help bring other people along.
Kind of closing up here, I do have to ask one question. In business transition and life, and successful people go through transitions, so many people talk about what turned into you and Cal and that relationship, and a lot of people blamed you, and I never understood that because I know you. But let me ask you a different perception, because everybody's asked you kind of the same thing of what happened. You and Cal were close at one point.
We were.
And how hard was that when that relationship changed, and something that you have loved so long, people started blaming you somehow for the demise?
Well, that's why I wasn't gonna. That's why I didn't know if I could do it, because, everything. Kentucky sports has always been a joy in my life, right? Like, I mean, I was
since day one.
I mean, I can remember the 1984 Final Four, Kentucky against Georgetown, when they couldn't make a shot. Like, that's like the earliest memory for me of basketball. And then, I watched every game from 1988 to now. I've probably seen every game they've played since then. I loved it, and it was hard to have this thing that was a joy in my life to have people mad at me about it. Yeah, the relationship with Cal deteriorating, it did hurt me. It did. It did not. I mean, we weren't the best. Like, it wasn't like we were spending Christmas with each other. But I used to talk to him 3 or 4 times a week, right? Like, we were work friends, but good work friends. He is different. He is a wonderful person. Let me be clear. He is a wonderful human being who has done more good than anyone will know off the court, and has, I think, a wonderful heart. One way he and I are different. If my strength is forgiveness, his strength, that is not his strength. Okay, his strength is generosity, but he does not forgive. Like, he holds grudges. And the moment he decided that I was kind of not on his team, like, that was it. That's it. There's nothing people would say, well, Matt, why don't you try to do something? There's nothing I could have done. I did everything I could. I tried. Nothing you can do. Like, but that's who he is, right? But yeah, it was tough. But what was more tough was having, I'm not acting like I'm doing this for charity. We make money. But I am doing this to sort of entertain and to have the people that you want to entertain and the people you want to please just be like, you're the worst. That was hard. That was hard. And I did think to myself, I cannot do this for another year. I want to be clear, because I think people took some of my comments wrong. I'm not saying that if Cal had come back, because of him, I wouldn't have come back. But I think the situation would have been such that I don't think I could have done that again. I couldn't have another year of people saying it's your fault. I just couldn't have done it, because this is supposed to be fun.
I don't know how you would have done it either. I had even gotten to the point where it was even hard for me to go to those press conferences, and I was not near the situation that you were, of just the toxicity of everybody. Even in my family group messages, I hate Cal, I love Cal, I wish he'd leave, I hope he'd stay forever, and it was just like, and
that's why I won't boo him, by the way, is because he's a human being. I know him. He's got feelings. He acts like nothing matters to him. It does. Okay? It'll make him sad if he comes in here and people boo. I hope they don't.
Yeah.
Because it'll make him, if people do, I understand, but it will make him sad. I know it will. In a way that it wouldn't everybody else. And so, I remember watching the Mitch Barnhart-Cal interview, which now will be one for the books, the TV interview, and watching it.
Wildest thing.
In hindsight, I was watching it going, well, that might be it for me.
Yeah.
If this is going to be
this.
If it's going to be like this, and then a week later it changes, which is another thing in life. Stuff changes quick, right?
Does.
Like, things can be like this 1 minute and completely different the next.
Transition is huge. We had the Pope transition. The last transition I want you to talk about, and then we'll log off. We're coming up on an hour. Is a cool moment, but had to be bittersweet when you sold the website. Because that's a successful moment. But you've worked your whole life for this, and I've been in those situations. I grew a business, and it came to the point I got offered an opportunity. I said, I got to sell this business, and I only spent 6 or 7 years. But you are, and I don't know if I know you recognize this, but you don't self-brag much. You're the top local media outlet in America. Local, right? You know what I'm saying?
For college sports.
For college sports.
That's right. Yeah.
Local. Definitely the biggest local personality I've ever followed on social media with sports and college sports. And you build that up, and it comes time for transition. What was that like for you?
It was, I didn't think it would be emotional, but when we signed the deal, I cried. And I didn't think it was going to be emotional. I had decided, I saw what the world now sees. I saw it coming before, which
You've
is
always been ahead of the game.
Which is the media market's about to change exponentially. It changed with social media, but I could foresee that there was a level of change coming. This is way beyond, like, I'm not going to go into it, but I read a book many years ago called Jihad versus McWorld, which was basically about how in the future there would be only two kinds of businesses that succeeded: mega corporations like McDonald's or little tiny mom and pop shops, and that if you were in the middle, you were death, basically. And that was the premise of the book. And it meant, and then as the internet rose, everything in that book became more and more true. And I would go back every couple years and read it just to sort of think about it from a business perspective. And when we were hyper local, hyper small, it worked. We were the jihad of versus of that. I realized at some point, we're now in the middle.
You are.
We're now in the middle. We're not local, but we're also not ESPN. And I think that's death. And so I was like, I have to do one of two things: either invest heavily to try to create a national network, of which KSR is the central, or sell it to a national network. It's the only way to work. And then Shannon Terry came along, and On3 didn't exist. And he was like, I'm building a new national network. It was perfect. It was like, these are the people, and KSR can be the center of a national network, but I don't have to run it, and I don't have to risk my money for it.
Long term, save the business that you love.
Save the business. If I'd kept going, I could have kept doing it, but I don't think it would have been as successful. So it was the perfect time. With all that said, from 2005 until about 2017, every single night at 9:30, I would sit down to write the nightly news and views. And I would write a few paragraphs that was basically who I am on a blog for 12 years, every night from Monday through Friday. I stopped doing that in 2017. But in 2020, when we sold it, it was like, 15 years of my life, I'm now no longer in control. So I didn't think it was going to be emotional, but then it was. I was with my friend Andrew Hubby, who started it with me, and Drew when we signed it. And Tyler, I think we had talked to on the phone, and I was emotional. But it was the right decision, but it did feel like you were giving away a piece of yourself. It's probably, again, this is very superficial, but it's probably like when people send their kid to college.
Yeah.
And they're like,
I know I have to.
yeah, and you're happy for them.
Very.
They're moving on in life. It's what's good for them, but it doesn't make it easy, right?
Yeah.
And so that's, in my little world, that's probably what it was like.
Well, I just want to say thank you for taking the time. I know you don't do this a ton, but I really appreciate it. I appreciate everything you've been to the Big Blue Nation, to this state, to the mountains. But to me, an inspiration when I wanted to get in this business, and an inspiration when I was at a low point. And I had great church family. I had great family. I have the best when it comes to those kind of things. But an outsider that spoke to me and said, you can make it through this. And now that I look on the other side, and we still have struggles every single day, and I have a wife and kids now and a successful life, I look at that and say, somebody outside of my circle who didn't have to came in and was very, very
I'm
encouraging.
proud of you, and I'm proud of your success. You've done great. I hope you continue to, and I'll be of any help I can. And also, I think it's very important when you climb the ladder, don't kick it down for somebody else, right? Like that's when I started. There were a lot of media members, almost all of them, who tried to keep us from having success. And I said to myself, I'm not going to be like that one day. I am not going to be the guy who looks at the young people and tells them to get off his lawn, right?
Like, you've got Mario now, Billy's
I'm not
came
going to do
along.
that. But not just for if you work for me. I mean that for everybody. So there was a podcast out there that really seemed to enjoy giving me a hard time and mocking me and criticizing me. I let them host while I was gone this summer. Because I'm not going to be the dude who tries to stop people from having success. I want to make it to where people can flourish, and I'm proud of you for being able to do that, and I hope other people get to too.
Awesome. As we sign off, is there anything you would say to somebody wanting to reach their goals? Because we've talked about the struggles, we've talked about the highs, the lows, and I've even got a 16-year-old kid here.
Kid? Come on, like what's your name again?
Dalton.
Dalton. I mean, you should see the video stuff he can do. That's it sounds trite, but if you want to be successful, you have to work hard, obviously. But working hard's not enough. You have to have a little bit of luck.
Always.
But you also have to always think, this is the thing I think most people who want to have success, the mistake they make. It's not enough that you want to do a particular thing. There has to be a need for what you want to do.
Yeah.
Right? So when I started the blog, there weren't blogs. So there was a need for it. Now, you wouldn't want to start a blog. There's not a need for it, right? Similarly, it's too crowded of a space, and like now people are on social media. So like you have to think like a business person. The worst mistake journalists make, the worst mistake a lot of people make is they don't think like a business person. So you have to think about what is an area that I can be successful. And then I really believe in Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hour rule. You can't do anything well unless you don't do it a lot.
A lot.
You got to do it a lot. And he says 10,000 hours. I don't know if that's the number, but you got to do it a lot. So whatever you want to do, like do a lot. You were telling me Dalton is doing a Hard Knocks about Rockcastle County football. I love that. I don't care. But listen, I don't care if 5 people watch it. The act of doing it is the point. And it will make you better because you did that. And so one of the reasons I hired Mario, he was putting out podcasts that not many people were watching, but he was still putting them out, and they looked great, and he put everything into it. And I was like, man, if that kid can do that and he's getting very little feedback, imagine what he can do with a bigger platform. That's how you have success.
I told one of my realtors the other day, I was reading that book by Jesse Cole called Find Your Yellow Tux. And it's a book about a guy, he was in his business, and he would show up everywhere he went in a yellow tux.
And he stood out, right?
And he stood out.
Yeah.
And I told them, I said, there's a million agents out there.
But how do you get your yellow tux?
How do you find your yellow tux? And I said, whatever's going to make you stand out. If you have the goal of, I want to be in media, I do this as part-time because, like I said, I do the real estate brokerage on the side, that is my main job. But I said to them, my goal was not to be the CEO of a real estate company. Mm-hmm. My goal was to be in a high-level business position and show people that I can change life in business and in church despite my reading stuff, despite my this, despite my that. And I didn't say I wanted to be a real estate CEO. I said I wanted to climb the business ladder and prove that it could be done with the things that I struggle with. And I did that. I didn't know my tux would be a real estate CEO, but I made it in business because I said I'm not going to take no for an answer. I'm going to try this business, I'll try that business till I find my spot. Mm-hmm. And I watched you showed me that through what you guys do, and I appreciate it. And
you got to be who you are. My ESPN show, if you were to go back and listen to my first year on the ESPN show, I sucked. I was terrible at it because I was doing what I thought people on ESPN did, right? Like I was like reading, like I was having hot takes and all this. And then I realized, you know what? First of all these people are doing that. They're better at that than me. Secondly, that's not me. So I went into year 2, and I just decided to make it the Matt Jones show. Like I goofed around. I started really having fun with Myron. And next thing I know, I did something completely different than what ESPN normally does. And then all of a sudden COVID hit, and they let 75% of the employees go. And you know why they kept me? They kept me because they were like, well, he does something nobody else does, so let's keep him around. That's the key. But thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, and I appreciate it. And we appreciate having you on, and we appreciate all you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.